funny. It always cracks me up how things end up happening. Last time I said, when I spoke, I said, I had been trying to speak several times. It kept getting delayed. It was on Mother's Day. Finally got to speak on Mother's Day. Wasn't going to speak this week. Ended up speaking. I thought, it's Father's Day. Of course. And then I really looked at this week. I thought, okay, I really feel when I speak, I'm just telling you what I've learned, what I'm experiencing. But I also want it to be something that's really meaningful for the people who are listening. And I thought, okay, Father's Day I love Father's Day. Father's Day is great. But right now, I think the LGBT community is really still reeling from this last week and a half, from the Orlando situation. And so I decided to go ahead. And I really looked at, I've been looking at, why did I have the response I had? Which was pretty neutral. I was kind of a little bit flat. I was a little upset, but then I was like, no, not so much. And I thought back, for me, I compared to 9/11. Which for me was, similar in the sense of I didn't know anybody there. It was, across the country. I heard about it from the news. And it profoundly affected me much more. I remember just sitting at home, basically paralyzed. I couldn't move. And, sorry, I'm watching Curie's trying to get a seat here. She's like, hey, everybody. And so it was different for me. I was like, so why am I having this different experience? And so I kind of wanted to share with you some of my thoughts of what's happened with Orlando. And I'm sharing it from the point of, my expectation is you're here at the Community Miracle Center. You're interested in spiritual concepts. You're interested in how do I live the will of God, which it says God's will for us is happiness. How do I have that even when something so crazy seemed to have happened and affected our community so profoundly? And so I'm sharing that, and like I said, I'm approaching it from, we're all kind of on a spiritual path here. I've seen teachers before share some of these concepts and say, so don't be upset. And I think that denies the fact that we're people. We're having a human experience. And yet at the same time, if we can look at these concepts, maybe we can find a way to process it better, process it differently. And so I chose this passage today. It starts off, and this is even a quote, I talked about this last night. It says, this is not the quote, sorry, it's a different quote. It says, what could you not accept if you but knew that everything that happens, all events past, present, and to come, are gently planned by one whose only purpose is your good? Perhaps you have misunderstood his plan, for he would never offer pain to you. And that's one of those concepts, I think we all know it's there, but it's sometimes hard to say, everything's for my good. How do we look at these situations and say, especially I would say, especially friends and family. There was one, I forgot, I think it was, don't remember who. One person was tweeting their parents from the restroom and said, I love you, I think I'm going to die, and they did. How do the parents look at that and say, this is for my good. God intended it for my good. Spirit has a plan even in this. And it was interesting, one of my friends, he's in astrology. He's actually very, very well known. He's written a couple of astrology books. He had written a couple days before Orlando, he said, astrologically, and he's freaky accurate. It's like, I've never been to astrology. He's freaky accurate. It scares me some days. And he says it's just because it's our projection. We're all one, so the astrology is just a projection of our consciousness. And he said, I'm not sure what's going to happen this week, but it is one of the biggest weeks of the year. He was like, this is a time for us to expand into our consciousness, expand into love. And then 2 days later, we heard about Orlando. And he said, I was reading an article he wrote, he says, I don't know how, I don't know why, but I do know everything is a chance for us to expand. And he didn't expect for that to be what would happen. He didn't expect to see something that we saw as a tragedy when he was looking at this chart going, oh my gosh, it's going to be a great week. And then we were suddenly faced with something much different for what we thought. But the reading today, this is the reading, I got this one. It says the only judgment involved at all is the Holy Spirit's one division into two categories. One of love and the other the call for love. You cannot safely make this division, for you are much too confused either to recognize love or to believe that everything else is nothing but a need for love. You are too bound to form and not to content. And the second passage, which is from the workbook, says, you perceive the world and everything in it as meaningful in terms of ego goals. These goals have nothing to do with your own best interest because the ego is not you. This false identification makes you incapable of understanding what anything is for. I thought about that because we look at things and we think, well, that shouldn't have happened. Why did that happen? And the Course says we're not in a position to be able to tell what anything's for. We look at things and it says, a lot of times somebody will look at this situation like in Orlando and will say, oh, that's a call for love. That person wasn't being loving, that's a call for love. And I think for all intents and purposes, that's what we see it as. We don't see that as a loving act. And yet the Course says you cannot safely make this decision because you are too confused to either recognize love or believe that everything else is nothing but a need for love. We've got bodies that are perceiving things through our past. We've got bodies that are perceiving things through our history. And so we can't really look at things and necessarily say what is and what is not loving. I'll be honest, this is, I kind of was like, do I talk about this a little bit? I'm going to talk about it because I like it. The Course talks about, for me, reincarnation. And it says, go, if you believe it and it's useful for your growth, whatever, fine. If you don't believe it, whatever. It doesn't really, it basically says I'm not taking a stand on it in the teacher's manual. But it says, is it useful towards salvation? Salvation being recognizing heaven is here and all there is the now. And for me, reincarnation does help with that because I'm able to look at something and go, okay, I may not understand why it's happening or where it's happening or why I have a connection with this person. But for me to be able to think that there's some sort of, and I'll say even apart from reincarnation, I don't think, our lives are not our lives. This isn't it. We existed before, we existed after because Spirit's eternal. And so for me, the concept of reincarnation kind of just gives that form. So there's a book I love. It's called Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping, and it's based on A Course in Miracles. But he talks about, and I'll read this one little passage. He says, the decision about which energies we work with on the earth plane is not made by us at the human level. The decision predates our incarnation and is made by our soul group, a group to which we belong made up of souls who either incarnate with us or act as our spirit guides during our incarnation. Once it is decided which energies we will work with, and this is the key part, it says, then we carefully choose parents who will provide the experiences we need as children, and we arrange for others to come along at the right time to play their respective roles in the experience necessary to accomplish our mission. We create dramas through our physical lives that allow us to experience the feelings that make up our mission. These dramas serve as opportunities to experience the separation we came to experience. I don't always 100% agree with him, but here's the thing. His whole theory and his teaching behind radical forgiveness is that everything happens for our good. It's back when I said, start with Course in Miracles. Everything is planned for our good. And he says, on a spiritual level, the existence of different beings is we are here to support each other in awakening. And so he says, maybe I need to learn the lesson of how do I not get tied up in my thoughts and my drama in things that don't, necessarily impact me directly. How do I extend love in situations that seem challenging? And so he says basically, we're drawing in, I think this is completely consistent with the Course, we draw in, we project, we create our own reality, we create our experience, and bring people in so that we can be supported in our awakening. Which means everything we see, everything we do, everything we experience is a gift to help us learn ourselves as love. Someone said to me one day, they said, so basically, and I'm not getting exactly quote because it was a little swearing, thank your bleep bleep of an ex-husband for being the jerk he was. Because he taught me how to forgive. He taught me how to love myself. And so we look at situations like this and we go, okay, well, what are the lessons we can learn from this? What are the experiences that we can get out of it? And how can we process this in a way that shows us love? And so I have about 4 or 5 things that I consider when I go through an experience that's challenging, when I go through an experience where I think, oh, this doesn't feel good, that I kind of mentally run through my mind. And one is I always try to see the innocence of the child of God. So it says, in the workbook, it says, what is forgiveness? It says, forgiveness recognizes what you thought your brother did to you has not occurred. It does not pardon sins and make them real. It sees there was no sin. And in this view are all your sins forgiven. What is sin except a false idea about God's Son? Forgiveness merely sees its falsity and therefore lets it go. So there's a lot in that little passage, but one thing is, it says, there is no sin. When you say, oh, that person's in sin, you're basically saying that that person is not what God created them as. The Course says a thought doesn't leave its source. And a lot of times, we read that, we think of it as, the thoughts in our mind don't leave us. But I think also the thoughts of God, which we are, don't leave God. God extends itself as itself. God extends itself as love. When we say, oh, that person is a sinner, that person's bad, we're denying that even though their actions may not look the way I think they should have, I'm denying their innocence, that they are still a thought within the mind of God. And sometimes it's hard to look at. People, the go-to is always Hitler. What about Hitler? I don't know why Hitler did and said and existed the way he did. But I know, because of what I've learned and what I've experienced, that God is love, and somehow that was an expression of love that needed to come to this world so that we could awaken. It could support us in some way. Sometimes that's hard to accept. I'll totally acknowledge that. There's times when you're like, that guy's a jerk, and I am not going to see him as innocent. And the hard part of that is when you don't see him as innocent, you really think that judgment can happen. And so you're going to end up judging yourself. But let's say you're still like, okay, I'm not quite to the point. And I totally acknowledge a lot of people aren't there. I'm not to the point of seeing this guy in Orlando as innocent. I don't necessarily want to acknowledge that I'm one with him. One of the big things I think in our spiritual practice is not only to say I'm responsible for what happens, I'm responsible for the dream, but I think where the rubber really hits the road is I'm responsible for how I react to my experience. And there's a big difference. People will say, I know what happened. Truth is, for me, there's a big difference between belief and know. I know something because I've experienced it. I know something because I've had an interaction with it. Anything that I haven't been able to experience and somebody just tells me falls in the belief category. I believe there was a shooting in Orlando because I heard it on the news. I believe he was probably, closeted gay guy. Why? Because I heard it on the news. But all those things, I believe he was probably studying different types of Islam and all. Why? Because I heard it on the news. Do I know any of those things to be true? I don't. There's a part of me that wants to say he went to a gay club, he shot a bunch of gays, so he must hate the gays. And I look at that, and I love the work of Byron Katie. She has 4 questions. First question is, do I know that's really true? It looks true. I think it's true. Second question is, do I really, really know it's true? And I go, well, I really, really want to think it, because what? If I say that, then I can say, well, look, we've been victimized. We need to rally the troops. We need to, whatever. But ultimately, everything I think about this man was based on stories I heard through the news. And so then there's 2 questions that Byron Katie has which are really powerful. And she says, how do I feel with this thought? And how would I feel if I let this thought go? I don't really know for sure what was in his mind when he went to the club. I don't know the experiences he had had leading up to that night. I don't know why he chose that day, that time, that weapon, that article of clothing to wear that day. You know, I mean, we could, everything. We don't know. And so I say to myself, how does it feel to have that thought? And the thought is that it's painful because I start feeling like a victim. What I know is man went into club, shot people. Anything beyond that becomes my story of being a victim. And that doesn't feel good. And so then the fourth question I said with Byron Katie is how would I feel without the thought? Man shot people. I don't know why. I don't know why those people were there. I don't know what their families are experiencing. I don't know what is coming out of it for them. But I do know that God is love and that Spirit has orchestrated this for some reason for each person to experience it. And if I say, oh, I'm a victim, I can't be safe if I'm in a gay club. Well, now I don't want to go to a gay club and have fun. A year ago, and it completely didn't even make the news because everybody was tied with Orlando. A year ago was Charleston 9. People were in a church having a study group and 9 people got killed. Churches are supposed to be safe. But the thing is within the experience of the world, we can sit here and we can say nothing is safe, nowhere is safe. Or we can look at the other side of it and say, God has got this. And it says the idea for today is, of course, and this is one of the lessons, it says the reason why a meaningless world is impossible. What God did not create does not exist. And everything that does exist exists as he created it. The world you see has nothing to do with reality. It is your own making. It does not exist. You know, that's one of those things, like I said at the beginning, I wouldn't go up to like the parents of one of those, kids that got killed and say, hey, by the way, this didn't happen. Because they're experiencing it happened. But as somebody on the spiritual path, I can look at it and say, I'm having this experience for a reason. If it doesn't seem that it's love, it's not from God. And I know that God is everything there is. And so I can reach into that comfort, I can reach into that space, and even if it seems horrible, know that we are spirit. We're not these bodies. It looks like we're these bodies. It feels like we're these bodies. We eat and drink like it's these bodies. But I really believe that we existed long before. We existed eternally before these bodies popped in. We're going to exist eternally when they pop out. Someone said to me one day, they said, what's death? And I said, it's other bodies not experiencing you anymore. You're still you. I believe that. Just because your body's gone, you're still, the spirit is the spirit. The difference is what other people are experiencing and what other people are going to do in response to that. And so I don't know why this happened. I don't know why he went into a bar and shot mostly young gays. There was rumors he was trying to avoid the African Americans. I don't know why. I don't know what he was doing. I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know why we all had to experience it the way we did. I just know that each and every experience I have is a call for either love, because when there is love, it says your brother must give it to you, or where there's a need for love, I have to give it because of what I am. So I want to read a little prayer. It will just be the last closing 1 minute or so I have. The meditation, I always start off, if you notice, I always start off with a light. And I use this what's called the 7 sacred flames. Some people believe that that's related to the 7 rays mentioned in the Course. I don't know. But the flames represent different attributes of God. And so this one prayer talks about love, and I just want to finish with it. It says, and you can close your eyes and just listen. It says, in the name of my beloved I am presence, I call the power of divine love to be magnified within my heart and world daily. I am love. joyous love, radiating love, unconditional love. God consumes my shadows, transmuting them into love. This day, I am a focus, a divine love, flowing through every cell of my being. I am a living stream of pure divine love that can never be requalified by fear, anger, hatred, dislikes, and greed. All negative thoughts and feelings are now dissolved and consumed by the power of divine love, which I am. I am love. I live in the consciousness of love. I am love in its fullest expression, blessing all mankind with divine love. I radiate love. I am love in action, blessing, uplifting, and healing all on earth. And so be it, beloved, I am.